welcome to Booktube.
Ready, aim, fire.
In today's episode, an interesting query. A comparison of two seemingly unrelated books, Part-Time Indian and Challenger Deep. You've now entered a strange and interesting dimension. You've now entered Booktube. Today's episode is brought to you by the letter ampersand. So one of the key issues in both of these books was identity and how it relates to the main character. In Part-Time Indian, we saw that through Junior's character and his experience in trying to fit in both the Native American and the white communities as he's adapting to life in his new school.
Yeah, we see him struggle a lot, especially his first day going into the school, being the only Indian kid there, and the difficulties that was faced where he expected to face them. But even beyond that, he has conflicts with identity at the reservation and has to fight both of those kinds of discrimination and oppression that he's feeling there, which I thought was interesting throughout it.
Well, it's also very interesting to note that as his character wants to be a cartoonist of some kind or another, it's interesting to note that when he draws himself at the beginning of the book, it's always a lot rougher and a little more less refined.
Right.
Whereas towards the end of the book, he starts to feel more in tune with who he is, who he identifies as, and his character comes out a little clearer.
He finds a way to belong in both of those spaces throughout it, which is something that Caden struggled with in Challenger Deep, was finding his sense of belonging in there, and kind of struggling with how he adapted to being in his own kind of created world and being absent in the real world, and those struggles of coming to terms with not only what was happening to him, but how that affected who he was in those spaces.
Absolutely. Especially with something as difficult as schizophrenia, how identity plays into how he's able to make sense of the world around him was a major part of that novel. And I think it's interesting that pieces of his real world life would work their way into his fantasies. For instance, you see his friends on the ship and leaving the ship as they do within the real world.
Very interesting. Agency. So another one of the main themes that is dealt with in both of these books is the concept of agency and how these characters regain their agency after losing it and what they choose to do with that agency. And I think we see that a lot in Part-Time Indian, especially with Junior's choice to go to the school off the reservation being one of the main pieces that we can pull from to discuss this. But within that, there are a lot of subcategories too. One that stuck out to me was when he created his own sense of agency by standing up to the basketball player and to the bullies, and ended up not only making the team but becoming friends with them as well, and exerting himself as someone who would not have his agency taken away from him.
Well, it's interesting because it's very much a book about Junior's choices and the consequences of those choices and how they relate to his life overall. I mean, as you said, we see kind of the start of the book is with Junior's choice to attend the nicer school, despite what that might mean for his personal life and for his school life. And like you said, his choice to even interact with the basketball team and to even go as far as to be violent.
Right.
Is a big choice for his own personal character. As we've seen, he's not a very violent person inherently, but also a big choice for his role in the community at that school, which is certainly something he has to deal with throughout the course of the novel. In Challenger Deep, we also see quite a few plays on agency and how Caden's able to make some different choices within his life. One example that comes to mind in particular is at the end of the novel where he is confronted once again with his schizophrenic mindset and with his fantasies, and makes the choice not to go down once again, or at least not yet, even though he acknowledges that someday he may go down once more.
No, absolutely. I think both of these work as really good stepping stones within the young adult genre itself to show kids how to assert themselves, how to regain agency when it's taken away, in Caden's instance. But it also works really well for adults. I felt, even coming to this as a college student, as you know, someone older than the target audience, that there were a lot of lessons to pull out about agency and what you can do to put yourself in a position to continue making decisions on your own and not have that voice taken away from you. I think when we talk about agency, the characters having their own voices and moving through their worlds and not being acted upon, just solely acted upon by the world, but acting upon the world themselves too, and influencing the world around him. Because even when Caden is dealing with his agency being taken away, he changes the ship dramatically through his choices in that world. So even when he's at his lowest, he's still able to exert those themes of agency throughout the book.
Making change where he can, and I think that's quite a big part of Caden's story, as opposed to Junior's story, which is the consequences of his choices.
Right, right.
So another key concept in both of these books that we decided to focus on is societal pressure. And in An Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, we see Junior being pressured by his society at home within the Native American community to not attend the school and to stay within kind of his own personal group and not venture out past that. And we see that Junior goes against the societal pressure and winds up facing consequences with his best friend, alienating him, with his own community not really treating him with any kind of respect, even with having trouble finding rides to his new school because his community just doesn't have the means or the desire to support him in his endeavors.
Absolutely. The pressure that Junior feels from the outside forces in his life are immense, and it's interesting for me that they came so close to home for him. Most of the pressure he feels is from the reservation when he chooses to go to school off the reservation. And we see that kind of antagonistical force, I think, brought upon him, if that's the right word for it, when he's playing basketball against his best friend. That final game, I think, is one where you really see that pressure put on him because he wants to do right by his own school, but in doing so kind of incurs the wrath of the people that he lives with, and that pressure that he's dealing with is monumental. Mentioning pressure, Challenger Deep, it's a lot of pressure down there. A lot of pressure. But Caden and his parents moving him into the institution solely because of the societal pressure. Now, obviously it was good for him to get help, and I would encourage people who need that help to go get it, but the stigma behind going and getting help for these mental disorders and really looking out for your mental health, I think the pressure put upon someone like Caden is so immense that it's almost easier to not get that help.
Especially when you factor in ideas like, because of this societal standard and norm surrounding the stigma of mental institutions, you got to wonder if maybe part of Caden's anxiety with going to one of these hospitals was the image that he had been shown through pop culture and the media, and just what we expect from these places more so than what they actually are.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point. Just dealing with all of that. You have the pressure that you're putting on yourself, you have the societal pressure around you, and then you have the pressure in the institute itself to get better. And those expectations that once you leave you're going to be fine, which Caden realizes isn't the case. It's a constant thing, and so you're always dealing with that bit of pressure. Mentioning societal pressure, I want you to go ahead and hit that like button, dab on that notification bell,
And don't forget to subscribe for
Yeah.
more excellent booktubes.
or none.
Probably none.
Yeah.
Smile more when you come back. Smile more when I see you. Smile more when the sun shines bright. Believe in me, I need you. Smile more when you blow me up. Smile more when I see your face. Smile more when I feel love. Smile less when I need to let go. Let go. Smile less when I let go. But you know I won't fall. Smile more when I see you. Smile less when I miss you. No, I don't wanna be left alone. Don't leave me here all alone. So keep me company. Swear they holding on my feet, but they not under me. The fumes on your sweater smell is so lovely. And I will never sell my soul, but you could write a lease. And don't believe in make believe, just make your ends meet. Say you're weak and end the week and never stress a thing. And we gon' go
One of the things that inspires us most is books.
So we came here to the library where books live.
awake, and in the morning when I see you.
Another one of the themes that I sat down and started talking way too.
Yeah,
Absolutely true diary of a part-time Indian, which I should probably say.
Right.
reaching out for you and still they're so far away.
Did you exhale?
It's so clear, crazy how I see you so clear, and how you make me smile, and how you make me smile.